and I am running as a candidate for a position on school committee. I currently am on the school committee, and I continue to be interested for this position because I've been a resident of Granby since 2007. I've been regularly attending school committee meetings for the past couple of years and had a growing interest in volunteering my time and becoming a part of something that I truly believe in. I've been an educator for the past 16 years, 7 of which have been involved directly in administration. And I believe that helps me bring a kind of different perspective to the table and allows that kind of educator perspective when participating in discussions and helping to make informed decisions as part of the collaborative process that we're involved in with within the school committee. So I think in my opening statement, I talked about my background as an educator, and I think it's that passion that's kind of brought me to wanting to continue to be a part of the school committee. I certainly, want to be an advocate for all students and believing that they will learn and can learn in a safe learning environment that, has their best interests at heart. And being a part of the school committee and working with the people that sit around the same table as I do, I believe that they also have that vested interest. And working together, we want to continue to work with administration and other various committees and ensuring that our students' needs are met in the best way possible to provide a great education experience for them at Granby. As a sitting school committee member, there's 3 main points, I guess, that school committee takes part in. So as many people saw over the past few months, or this part of the year, there was a superintendent search that happened, and school committee and myself in particular was a part of the search committee, and then the final kind of part of the process was interviewing finalists and selecting a superintendent. So that part with working closely with the superintendent is one area. Another area is implementing policy. And so identifying any policies within the school that may need updating or changing, ensuring that everything the school needs to be functioning well is there. That's another integral role for school committee. And lastly, it's the approval of the budget while we don't create the budget. And that is something that the superintendent and finance manager and administration team does, is creating the budget. We are there to obviously approve and go through and understand the budget process, and that is our other main role. So I think there's a couple things. The first thing is that, we don't hear often enough what a great place the high school already is for learning. And I think focusing on the fact that there is already a lot of great things that occur there between the teaching staff and the administration staff and everybody in between that helps to support the students in their learning. There are great things happening for our students there every day. That being said, I can understand that, especially if we're looking at the next 25 years, that's certainly a long period of time, potentially quite a longer period than the next 3 years of a term on school committee. But there are some certainly structural and building needs that I think a lot of people in town are keenly aware of, and wondering what that would look like building wise for the high school. And I think while that's a focus that we need to kind of continue to work on and address, whether it be through considering, renovation or the high school and the building itself, as we certainly want to make sure it's a safe and productive place for all students to learn in. It doesn't detract from the fact that students are already learning and growing in the building that they're in. Choice. When it comes to students choosing to choice out of the Granby School District, that is certainly something that school committee and the schools themselves don't certainly have any choice over. It is certainly something that we can continue to try to investigate more closely to figure out if there are any trends that we need to be aware of, any reasons why students are choosing to choice out of Granby, and any adjustments that we can make, within the schools to, if there is a trend to kind of get away from that, or make any adjustments or improvements to kind of keep students from leaving the Granby Public Schools. Sometimes there is, sometimes there isn't. It's obviously sometimes a very personal choice for families. In terms of students choicing in, I think I am certainly a proponent of school choice when done responsibly and reasonably. So when school choice is done as a way to utilize space within a classroom that already exists without extending class size, without extending additional personnel needed or additional classroom needed, I think then that makes sense. If we're needing to add classes, add classrooms, add staff, or when we're needing to kind of go over our anticipated class sizes of where the community in town had liked to see us, then I think that's something when school choice and those numbers are not adding up for us, and where we need to kind of create that balance and draw that line. So I think the first thing is when you're thinking about the budget and you're thinking about kind of cuts from the budget because you're looking at a deficit. The number one thing that I think everyone's always keeping in mind is that you want any cuts to be kind of as far away from the classroom as possible, so that it's the least impactful or directly impactful on students as possible. So that's the number one thing. I think the other piece to this, though, is that you have to kind of constantly assess and understand where you are with your budget kind of throughout the year. So I know with school committee, there's the finance subcommittee, and they do meet regularly. They do provide updates to the full committee, and that is helpful in kind of understanding where we're at with the budget, whether it's from where we are with Chartwells, with food, to food service, to where we were this year with our COVID grants and things like that, with how the money's been spent and where we're at with the percentages of that. Like, that information's been helpful in terms of the budgeting process. I think the other thing is that, and something we heard a lot of through even the superintendent search finalist interviews too, is that it's being kind of creative with funding, and it's finding ways to not only look at offsets, but ways to kind of make your budget work. So if you're looking at finding creative ways to make use of area businesses, local colleges, things like that, that can kind of partner with the school and kind of supporting students. Then maybe you're having programming, things like that, that isn't costly at all, but a way to support students. So I think things like that can help as a different avenue. And I think some of the other things that are just things that are sometimes out of the school's control a little bit is that, we have rising healthcare costs overall, and that does impact the budget in terms of healthcare benefits for staff and employees. And then the other thing too is there are state mandates, and there are things that happen that are often unfunded, and schools are expected to make sure that they're in line and in compliance with what those mandates are. And that is tricky to do, and to make sure that those are implemented without a lot of support. So it's really a balancing act that we support the school in working through each year. So I think with this question, I talked about it a bit in my previous question, but I think a lot of it comes from funding, really. We're not an urban inner city school, and we're not one of the most rural schools either. So we're kind of somewhere in between, and then we don't necessarily receive any kind of funding on either end. So it's being very creative, potentially forming those partnerships like with area businesses, or creating those opportunities for students that are interested in a vocational school. And it's allowing the people that are working in the school, whether it be the superintendent, the administration, the teaching staff, those opportunities to be able to do that for our students, and to kind of work collaboratively with them, so that they can do that. And I think that's what I kind of envision in moving forward. And that's what I'd like to see. So I think one of the things that has come up is, space and facilities is one of the challenges. So space at East Meadow has been something that's come up, and something that will continue to need to be addressed. There's been some kind of talk about the need for a potential subcommittee to address that. And I think that makes a lot of sense, especially when you're talking about needing to hear kind of a group perspective on being creative and understanding kind of all voices, and making an informed decision. So I think that's one piece. And the facilities, again, at the high school, in looking at some of the questions, there was a lot that seemed to focus on infrastructure and capital improvements, and the high school and things like that. So I think that's the other one. I think some good things that are happening, and some positives, are certainly that we're a smaller district that provides some individualized and personalized learning opportunities for students. And I think that's awesome. And I think that's something that needs to be shared far and wide, because that doesn't always happen everywhere. And I think although it can be tiresome and exhausting sometimes to be super creative with the budget, it does allow for some unique opportunities for students that maybe they wouldn't have elsewhere. And I think that is something also that is a great thing that we can continue to grow with, and should be highlighted. So with core values, when it comes to me thinking about students, because I thought about this question kind of in two ways. So when it comes to me thinking about students, I think about the fact that all students need a place to learn and grow that's safe, and offers them the opportunity to uh, be supported in their learning. And that to me is kind of the ultimate goal. And no matter what I do or the impact that I have. When it comes to me and my role on school committee, I certainly want to continue to be somebody who's honest and trustworthy, and collaborative. I mean, those I think are the three things that I think of. And to put one over the other, I'm not sure that I could do that, but I would hope that I would become somebody that the community could rely on, in terms of all three of those things. So building relationships with the community is very important. I think, we've had a couple instances through meetings that I've been a part of so far this year where, it's been difficult to kind of hear the community perspective on different topics or different feelings on things. But I strongly believe that it's something that I don't take personally, because I think anyone sitting in any chair on school committee would have the same kind of views, kind of voice to them, because as a parent, you're going to be your child's biggest advocate, and that's not going to change no matter what person is sitting in the chair on school committee. So I think keeping that open line where parents have the opportunity, or community members or whoever it may be, to talk during comments and meetings, I think that's important. And I think it's important for people to hear that it's something that needs to continue, and it's welcome. And I think the other thing is that even with other committees and things like that, through, school committee working with select board or whoever it may be, I think that's an important part too. And I don't want that to get lost either. And I think that's something that would be important to me to kind of continue to work on building a relationship with and trust with, as a member of the school committee. So I think, and I'm hopeful that now that we've moved forward with at least offering the position to one of our finalists for superintendent, that we're going to be able to look forward to having some consistency and some stability in the district. And, what I heard a lot of through that process was wanting that, and then working toward that shared vision, using that same common language, and just having that kind of representation as a whole for everybody. And I think, and I truly believe that that is what's going to kind of keep the Granby School District moving forward together, is that it's going to allow everybody to be on the same page, to know where you're going and why. And that is ultimately going to be what's going to be impactful for students, and in a positive way. And I'm excited about that. I think it's a great thing, and I'm really looking forward to it. I think there's, there could be quite a few burning issues, I guess, depending on what your perspective is and what your personal stake is. I still think that ensuring that students are in school, and kind of we're looking at how students kind of stay in school and what that continued reopening process looks like, through the end of this year and into next year is going to be a big one. We have some information and guidance from DESE that's kind of supported that information through the summer, but there's not a lot of information out there yet in terms of what to look at for next year. And I think needing to continue to wait for that guidance, potentially, obviously rely on it, and then rely on some of the other committees and staff that have been so integral into getting us to where we are now is going to be important in moving forward. And I think there's still a lot of work that will be done in that area. And I think other hot topics or issues are obviously going to be the ones that I've already mentioned, including space and the building structure and budget, which are always going to be there to some lesser degree each year. Did ask that question. And I think that is a question when you're talking about a philosophy for developing and implementing a budget is one for kind of the superintendent, business manager, administration, things like that, because they are the kind of that core team that works on developing that budget. But I would like to think that when they are doing that work, knowing that they have to continue to keep the school committee involved and updated, and obviously seek our final approval as well, that the budget would always be, student-centered. It would always be consistently reviewed and assessed. Again, being a very collaborative process so that you're thinking about all the stakeholders and, considering what things look like within the school, and very much a needs-based budget. And that, it's something that we're kind of constantly having conversations about so that there aren't any surprises at the end. That to me is something that's going to be very important as we go through this process and this budget cycle and kind of continue forward, hopefully into next year as well. Again, I think when we're talking about capital projects or capital improvements and infrastructure, it certainly leads me back to thinking about potentially the high school and what that building might need, whether it be just maintenance, renovation, new building. I think it does need some things. And I think we need to be just reasonable and responsible when we're going through that process and looking at it. But it is something that's consistently and continually brought up, whether it be by parents, community members, other committees. It's something that's on everybody's minds. And I think that is kind of the primary topic that comes to my mind when asked this question. So again, I think when I started to answer, maybe I answered a part of this when I talked about one of my earlier questions. So when transitioning to a post-pandemic way of life, everyone's tired of hearing about, returning to a sense of normalcy and things like that. But I mean, that's what I think about for students, right? So how can we help support, as a school committee, how can we help support the schools and ensure that students get to transition back to a place that is similar to maybe what they knew and in as much close to the way as possible. And I think that goes back to looking at the guidance, understanding the guidance from DESE and what protocols and procedures need to be in place for safety. I think that's obviously the first and foremost thing that we need to understand and look at. And I think the other pieces that go along with that is that it's going to be a long-term process, right? So it's not just, what do things look like in August or September when students go back, but what does this look like long-term for students to meet their kind of learning needs or learning gaps, maybe that grew as a result of this, and then how to address their social emotional needs as well, and then how to support the school and making sure that they have what they need to meet the students' needs. So that's where I think my focus would be with that. Minutes to discuss what we did not discuss. So I feel like we've covered everything that me as a school committee member would be responsible for, and then some, because I feel like there were quite a bit about areas that I wouldn't necessarily be responsible for, but would work collaboratively with administration on to ensure that it was the best educational experience for students as possible. So I don't think I have anything else to add, other than, as much as this is a a time commitment and a volunteer position and all that jazz, it is something I enjoy. Like, I do enjoy working with the rest of the school committee and the members of the school community, and all in the sense of working towards the betterment of our schools for our students. And so I appreciate, Alex, I appreciate you doing this, because I think this was a great way to just kind of get one message out to everybody. And I appreciate your time and willingness to do this. And I thank everybody who watches for your time as well. So thank you. I will say thank you again to anybody who does watch and take the time to get to know me a little bit better. I hope since I am running unopposed, I hope I do a good job in your mind in serving our students of Granby. And I look forward to continuing in this role and supporting our students. So thank you.